Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Constructing Downtown Storrs Center 20-Year Update. My name is Kristen Lopez. I am the Education and Training Director here at Connecticut Main Street Center. 24 years ago, the Town of Mansfield and the University of Connecticut had a vision to create a vibrant, walkable, mixed-use downtown. Today, Storrs Center is home to 60 businesses, 1,300 residents, and both civic space and multi-use buildings. So what's next? That's what we'll be discussing today in our presentation. And before I invite Cynthia to share the story, let's have a few words. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. It is our mission to assess, educate, and convene around the topics central to creating a thriving downtown so that main streets all around the state can develop, grow, and prosper. We all know a great downtown when we see it. It's a feeling and an energy that we can sense, see, and experience, but sometimes it can be hard to articulate what exactly makes a main street great. We've broken it down into 6 qualities to make it a little easier to grasp. First, there is a dedicated Main Street management entity. The Main Street is connected by multiple modes of transportation for people to access. It's welcoming, friendly, and inclusive. Sustainable practices bring life and vibrancy for today and for the future. Small businesses are supported and encouraged, as well as development investment. And lastly, there is a unique sense of place. And so it is our mission to teach along these qualities of a vibrant downtown so that main streets all around the state can really thrive and be vibrant. We are very grateful to our sponsors and funding partners that make this work possible. Connecticut Main Street's founding sponsors are Eversource and the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Our educational programs are sponsored by Webster Bank and Liberty Bank, with thanks to our corporate investors, Penn Globe and Capital for Change. Quick notes here, the webinar will be an hour long and we will stop for questions at the end. So please feel free to type your questions in along as we go. I'll make sure we get to them when we're open for Q&A. And of course, there's an evaluation survey when you exit the webinar. Please take a moment to complete it. It really helps us develop meaningful educational programs for you. And so with that, I am very excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Cynthia van Zelm, Executive Director of Mansfield Downtown Partnership. She's been involved in Downtown Storrs from its inception and now concentrates on managing and promoting the downtown and Mansfield's economic development. With that, Cynthia, I'll stop sharing and you can share your slides.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Can everybody see this?
Not yet.
Okay. Can you see it yet? No?
No.
Okay. All right.
All right, here it goes.
Here we go. All right, I think we're good now.
Looks good.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, thank you to Kristen and the Connecticut Main Street Center. I've been working with the Connecticut Main Street Center since I started here. One of my first meetings was in West Hartford with the team. So I'm very excited to be here and happy to talk about what we've done and where we're going and how we might be able to help those of you in attendance. I see some familiar names and some new folks that I don't know. So looking forward to getting to know you all. First of all, I wanted to recognize our great staff team, some of which are on the webinar today. Kathleen Patterson, who is our Senior Communications Manager, Magdalena Pulowski, who is our Event Coordinator, and Rosemary Watson, who is our Administrative Assistant. Couldn't do it without them and without also our great Board of Directors. So contrary to what some may think, this did not come to fruition overnight. It was really decades in the making. There was interest in trying to create more of a village center in Mansfield since as early as the 1960s. And I also wanted to note, I think most people in Connecticut know this, but Storrs is a village within the town of Mansfield. It's not its own government, and it's one of 19 historic villages that comprise the town. So things really got going in 1999 when the Town Green Committee was formed to research, looking into how we could increase the tax base and revitalize the downtown. The Town Green Committee put together a vision, which has really been the vision, then the mission, and really what we're still focused on today, which is a downtown area of both commercial buildings, public open spaces, and residential options. In 2001, the Downtown Partnership was formed as a nonprofit organization by the town and the University of Connecticut. We are a 501c3, a nonprofit as well. And I think it's really important to note that this was a very equal effort by both the town and the university. And I think sometimes we hear, well, it's UConn or it's the town. It's very equal in terms of our representation on our board and our funding and really the involvement throughout the whole development. The other piece I wanted to mention in terms of our planning is we spent a lot of time going through several different plans. We had an initial master plan, we had a municipal development plan, which is a way to do development through the Connecticut statutes. And we also, things started to really gel in conjunction with what was going on at the university and their major infrastructure program. So UConn 2000, 21st Century UConn. In 2003, after going through this planning process with a consultant team and following a request for qualifications, we selected Leyland Alliance out of Tuxedo, New York as our master developer. And so for about 3 years, we went through an extensive planning process to approve our municipal development plan, to go through the zoning process. So you can see that we had a lot of partners in this process, and all of those entities needed to approve our plan going forward. And then in 2007, after 4 nights of public hearings, the Mansfield Planning and Zoning Commission approved comprehensive design guidelines, which secured the zoning regulations for the mixed-use buildings. And we had a unique process in terms of how we did that. So the entire plan was approved so that the approvals for specific buildings would come back through an administrative review. So the Director of Planning and Development would have the ability to use the zoning regulations and be able to do the approval. So we wouldn't have to go back through the Planning and Zoning Commission for every piece of the process, whether it was the private buildings, the public infrastructure, et cetera. And then part of this, we also, which I think was critical, put together a development agreement for the first phase of the development. And that was an agreement between our master developer, our residential developer, EDR, which is now Greystar, and the town, because of all the public pieces to this project. So a public garage, a transportation center, roads, town square, and all of those were generally funded through $25 million in federal and state funding. So we needed to have an agreement that covered who is responsible for what in the new development. So finally, after about 10 years of planning, construction began in 2011. We went and the construction went through 4 different phases. First building opened in 2012, and then the construction of Storrs Center was complete in 2017. So we wanted to make sure that when we started promoting and enhancing the downtown, that it included our commercial partners and residential partners that were already part of the district. So we refer to the downtown now as Downtown Storrs, and we have branded it that way and marketed it that way. So that included such things as our town hall, our high school, UConn School of Fine Arts complex, as well as, and I won't go through the whole list here, but as well as the new part of the development, which the last 3 bullets that you see here, there, the Oaks on the Square, Main Street Homes, and then Storrs Center, which are the commercial spaces. So just for some context, we have about, and this is in the entire downtown, over 70 businesses. We have 42 townhomes and condominiums that were built, and 618 apartments, market rate apartments that are called the Oaks on the Square. So we're going to do a little before and after, which, Kathleen did such a great job of securing our before photos before we lost them, but I think it really does tell the story. So that was the original dog lane going straight down to Storrs Road, the old University Publications building. Here's a rendering of what was to be. And there it is. So that was the very first phase of Storrs Center. And then again, another perspective, you can see the construction fence. And again, on your right is the former UConn Communications building. And then this just shows the vibrancy, people starting to come to our downtown in the new first phase. And then another perspective, this is from E.O. Smith High School, which is our regional high school. So again, that UConn building you can see over on the left, and then the building to the right was owned by the university, had several commercial businesses there. And then here is the rendering, which you'll see this is where the town square was also going to go in, and we realigned Dog Lane to allow for that part of the development to occur. And voila, there is the completed development. This is an earlier photo, so it doesn't include our band shell, so to speak, but that was a development that happened right after, not right after, but that coincides with that rendering. And then Kristen asked me to talk a little bit about the structure of the partnership and how important it was to have the partnership. One of the key things that early on, the mayor of Mansfield was very involved with the National League of Cities. And one of the things that a team there recommended was to develop a separate entity made up of the town and UConn and our commercial businesses. So that was a recommendation that our board went with. And so the partnership was formed in 2001, basically to oversee the development of the downtown. It's loosely based on the national 4-point approach, but we are unique in that we focused on the new development rather than historic preservation, which a lot of downtown developments have a lot of historic buildings. We really didn't have any. We spent a lot of time building capacity, communication. We had several committees that were involved with what we were doing. And to our board's credit, we brought on folks that were not necessarily in favor of the new development. And that really gave us a good perspective. But we spent a lot of time, probably about 400 meetings, meeting with neighbors, as noted here, public hearings, committee meetings, community events. So it was really a process to try to get everybody either on board or at least answer their questions that they might have. So this is our mission, and foster the continued development, management, promotion of downtown Storrs. In about 2017, we pivoted a bit to take on economic development townwide as we started to add staff and as the need was there from the town and Yukon to provide some consistent and sustainable staffing to do economic development for the town. It was being done through the town, but generally a little bit not with a permanent staffing situation. So here are a couple of pictures of some members of our board, some of our volunteers. Again, getting back to maintaining that equality between the town and Yukon. We have 3 positions each. We have 2 student reps. We added one several years ago and then added a second one 2 years ago. And then we have 6 elected positions by our membership. 2 ex officio positions, our mayor and the Yukon president or designee. I mentioned our staff team earlier, and so those are the titles of our staff team. Funding the partnership, that has obviously, let me back up a little bit. We have been funded equally from the very beginning. The contribution has increased over the years. We are now at Yukon and the town contributing $175,000 each to our operations. I mentioned our role in economic development. So the town pays us $40,000 for economic development. And then we do have members / supporters, which are generally individuals, and trying to continue to grow our business base to have more business supporters. And that's about $15,000. Our key activities support our businesses, support our operations. We get very involved in parking, involved in working with public works and facilities in terms of making things continue to look great. Promotion and marketing, that's a major piece of what we do, as well as our community events. And Kathleen and Magdalena have the lead in those areas, but really promotes our goal is to really continue to make sure we do things that affect and help our businesses, also our community as well. So there may be an event that may not directly help our businesses, but because it's increases the quality of life for residents and visitors in the Yukon community, we will do some of those events as well. So I think Kristen also wanted to talk a little bit about the transition. So, we went from essentially a planning organization to a helping with construction organization to now a management organization. So I see it as 3 phases. We adopted our most recent strategic plan in last year. Yes, almost 2 years now. And that really focused on assisting our businesses even more closely, improving our public spaces. We did a lot to really bring about our town square and to bring about our pocket parks. And, some of that work needs to be upgraded. And I'll talk about that in a minute. When our master developer sold 2 sections or the 2 pieces of Storrs Center, that brought on 2 new property owners. And some of those players have changed over the last few years. So really strengthening and building those relationships, helping them to understand how important the partnership is to what they're trying to do for their businesses has also been a real focus. So anything we would do differently? Don't begin a major construction project right before a global recession starts. That was that was tough. So 2008 came along, and we struggled with especially the housing piece. And I want to give our board credit because it was very, very difficult, as everybody knows here, to get financing for housing, and they really wanted some for sale housing in the development. And it took a while, but they pushed, and we were able to get those 42 townhomes and condominiums. So certainly being persistent, trying to wait things out, but that did delay us a little bit. But I'll talk about it a little bit more in lessons learned, but everybody was focused, and there was never any discussion that we were going to stop moving forward. And so we kept going. And again, a lot of credit to the town and UConn leadership and our board for that. So again, lessons learned, clear direction, make sure everybody's on the same page. Again, we didn't really deviate from the 3 pieces of what the development was going to be. We have frequent communication between emails, newsletters, a lot of the work that Kathleen, and I want to commend her again, that she did to really continue to get out to what we were doing, where we needed assistance, and just keeping completely focused, all on the same page. I know Carl is definitely an advocate. We talk about it a lot, but dedicated and funded staff. We had a little blip looking at our funding at the town budget meeting for a couple of years, but we had a group that came together and got out the word, had several neighborhood meetings, and really conveyed how important it was to have the partnership, working with our development team and continuing to fund the partnership going forward. So having the dedicated staff and the dedicated funding, I can't emphasize anymore how important that was. Be ready to pivot. We talked about the recession. Also COVID, obviously, and everybody on this call had to deal with that, as well as the housing crisis. But being able to help our businesses, making sure that our property owners were aware of kind of the issues, and to their credit, helping our businesses, whether it was rent relief, whether it was delaying some rent, whatever they could do. And certainly we were affected by COVID in terms of losing some businesses. But we'll talk a little bit more about, we're on the positive end now. I'm incredibly blessed to have a great staff team. We've brought on staff that represent what we are trying to do now, what our mission is now. Also seen a lot of ability to change with what's happening. So we've had, a team that, event planning might not have been what they started out doing here, but they grew into that and developed. And so it's been a real pleasure to have such a talented team. The last one, and hopefully my team won't laugh at this because I still struggle with this, trying not to sweat the small stuff and keep the big picture in focus. I would see a piece of gum on the sidewalk and it drove me crazy when this was first built. Now, there's hundreds of pieces of gum. And so one of the things that I try to remember too is trying to remember, and the photos really help with what was here and what we have. And we really, as a team, just I think the improvement is really hard to ignore. And obviously the taxes that are coming into the town are critical. This development continues to be the #1 taxpayer for the town of Mansfield. The future is bright, as I alluded to. 4 new businesses opened last year. We have 3 new that have announced leases in 2023. We have actively a couple that opened, one that opened about 3 weeks ago, one that's opening next week, 2 that are supposed to open in December, and another one that's supposed to open by March. Our event attendance has come back to pre-pandemic levels, so we're really happy about that. And we're also hearing good reports from our business owners indicating that business is strong, and a few that have even said it's stronger than it was before the pandemic. We're trying to continue to reach out to them and work with them going forward. That's critical for us. And just a couple of photos to show a picture on the town square, some of our events, where you can see we have, array of ages as well that come to the downtown, which is great for us to see. So here's my contact information, and I'm happy to answer any questions or talk to anybody offline. There are many people on this call who have been mentors to me, and I can't say how much I've appreciated their support throughout the years. So I'll turn it back to Kristen. Would you like me to stop share, Kristen, or?
Yes, if you don't mind, stop sharing. Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was an excellent presentation, and I'm just going to open us up now to Q&A section. There's a couple questions that we got in advance, so I'll get to those. And I just want to underscore 400 meetings. Wow, that's a lot of meetings.
I actually counted too. I went into my calendar. So it's somewhat legitimate. Let's put it that way.
Wow, that's impressive. I see we have a question that came into the chat. I will get to that in a second. I want to ask these questions that came in registration. What advice do you have for Connecticut's other 168 towns, many under the control of anti-growth elected officials? Any words of advice?
Yeah, and I know you shared that with me, Kristen, so I thought about that a little bit. I think, and I covered it in the presentation, but having a master plan, so you can show the thoughtfulness that's gone into it, and also showing the benefits. I think that having the source of revenue, the tax revenue, is critical if people want to continue to promote their town and have their town as a desirable place to start a business, to live. Sustainability guidelines I didn't mention, but we did have a set of sustainability guidelines as part of our project. And I think that's also important to continue to show how we're making these buildings and the infrastructure as sustainable as possible. Design guidelines I mentioned briefly too, that are part of the zoning. I think anything that you can do to have a dedicated plan, I think will be more palatable to your community and your leaders, and just showing that you're putting in the time and the effort to make this as great as a project as possible. Our project is also very dense, so that's another thing that would appeal, I think, to whatever anti-growth vibes there might be. We also preserved a lot of open space that I didn't mention. So we have about 30 acres of open space that's owned by the town now, that was conveyed to the developer by UConn and then to the town. So showing that you are going to preserve some open space, maybe something that you can bring to the table.
That's excellent advice. And I think also to underscore, which may not be a satisfying answer, but the patience. You said in the 1960s, there was a vision, the plan didn't happen till the late 90s, right? So part of it is the leadership and kind of the tide coming in. Just another question we had that came in prior. How have you attracted small retail and boutique retail to downtown? Have you utilized an incentive program to attract these types of businesses?
Yeah, we do not have incentive programs per se in the town. We have over the years sent to first to the development team and then to the folks that bought the property from Leyland ideas about different businesses. And we continue to try to do that. There's a couple of businesses that were regional businesses, one startup that we brought to the development team. We've been a couple of our businesses, Gansett Wraps, Dogland Cafe, they have other regional locations, and that's where we found a lot of progress in terms of who's interested in being here. We have several small businesses. We don't have a lot of retail here. And that's one thing when we went through our prior strategic planning process, we just looked at it honestly and said, is that something we're going to be able to get here? Given whether it's our location or a market, and then of course the way retail has changed. So we've tried to be realistic. Ultimately, it's up to the property owner to negotiate those leases, but we have tried as a board and a staff team to promote as many local and regional businesses as we can.
Well, thank you. Let's get to the questions in the chat. Is there any deed restricted affordable housing? If not, are there any plans to add some?
There is not any in downtown Storrs, but I believe the town of Mansfield is looking into that. So just to put a little bit of this in context. So about 4 years ago, the town was able to bring water and sewer into the Four Corners area, which is the intersection of Route 195 and 44. And that, along with it being an opportunity zone, has brought a lot of development there. And it's basically been multifamily housing with some commercial below. So there's definitely been an interest of, how do we ensure that there is affordable housing in those developments and going forward. So I can, if someone's interested, I can point them to Jennifer Kaufman, the Director of Planning and Development, because they're definitely looking at this. They have an affordable housing trust fund. They have all kinds of criteria for having affordable housing, whether it's having units or contributing to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Most developers in the last couple of years have chosen to contribute financially to the trust fund.
Mm-hmm. With the university presence, can you speak about the residential turnover in the district and how that affects your management approach? And I think also too, this could apply to any other area that has some type of seasonality to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is a challenge. I think one of the things that we've tried to do when a business will come to us that's interested in coming here, which was more true in the beginning than it is now, but is to emphasize the seasonality to make sure everybody understands that we are a quieter time in the summer. One thing that we've also emphasized because of that, and we've been doing that more recently, is to make sure that you get out, and Kathleen's done a great job with this, you get out and market to our community members. And they're going to want to come here even more in the summer, a lot of them anyway. And so just making sure that you're in our local newspaper, you're advertising in our Parks and Rec brochure, things like that, advertising through Jorgensen brochure. So just making sure that you don't forget about that larger audience. I think you had another part to the question, Kristen. I'm sorry.
No,
about the residential, maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the Oaks, they don't count because of fair housing laws, what they have there, but it is a high student representation. So we have a good relationship with the Oaks team there, and just making sure that we get information out every year about what businesses are here, what events we have going on. And to their credit, and our property owner, our two major property owners, they contribute financially to the partnership as well. So we're appreciative of them understanding how this, as I said earlier, can benefit the businesses, but also the residents living in the Oaks, as well as the condos and townhomes.
Mm-hmm. And I want to underscore another point that you've brought up throughout your presentation, but the importance of communication, whether that was the stakeholder communication, but then also the newsletters, the marketing, and this is really the benefit of having funded staff to keep up that importance of communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is from David here. I presume there were concerns about density and traffic. If so, how were those concerns addressed? Kind of going to the anti-growth question as well.
Sure. Yeah, so there was a traffic study done as part of this whole process. So, traffic study, storm, all the usual, what you have to put together for a zoning application, and what we had to do specifically for the Storrs Center Development District. So that was all done as part of that process, and continues to be done kind of on an individual basis for other developments in town. The density piece, we did have questions certainly in the beginning about the height of the buildings. So that was definitely a concern, and by some, not all, because a lot of people like the fact that we were going up. So we did a little bit of kind of eyeballing comparison to Yukon buildings, which several of which are 7 or 8 stories high. There was originally the thought to do an 8-story building kind of in the back of the property that borders the open space, and mainly because of the housing crisis, the development team decided not to do that. So most of our buildings are 4 stories, 5 stories. So it's larger than sort of what's across the street, but if you look at it next to the 2 dorms, the 2 Yukon dorms, it's similar in terms of height.
Mhm. Although there is clearly an addition to the municipal tax base, has there been an increase in municipal costs that offset that somehow? This is something we hear in my town, that development will cost the town money.
Yeah, that's a good question. So early on, the town dedicated what they called Storrs Center Reserve. And so early on, there were definitely the additional costs of from the building department for, obviously the inspections and all of that, public works, a little bit with facilities. So those were the main costs. Right now, what we've done is build in to the current municipal budgets, help from public works. The partnership is all, so that's all being funded right now through the general fund. So there's definitely been an increase, but probably most of it was early on with attorney fees and things like that.
How do you balance the development while maintaining agricultural lands?
Do you mean just for downtown Storrs or or economic development in general?
Lisa, if you want to clarify that. I am curious, is there any thought in general, she said, so I guess
Okay.
for the town, yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of protected land in Mansfield for agricultural land, because obviously we have a lot of it. I would probably again defer to Jennifer Kaufman on that. I think, as I mentioned, for the downtown, the open space piece was a very important part of this. But the town is, part of its plan of conservation development is very focused on maintaining our agricultural land. So one thing that we tried to do with the downtown is to emphasize again that it was actually a redevelopment project. So it was already in a fairly dense area of town, between being on the edge of the southern part of Yukon, across from the high school, across from the town hall, the community center. So we weren't trying to develop it in an area that was less development and didn't fit with the plan of conservation and development.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little about how the Storrs Center Green came together, how its installation was funded, and how it's programmed?
Sure, yeah, we really consider that the jewel of what we are trying to do here. So we funded that largely through donations. So between the town, the university, the partnership, we had some fund balance, our development team, a couple of private developers. It was about $1 million to develop the square. It is a mix of some green and paved area, which is what we wanted to give us some flexibility there. So we look at it more as a European, kind of like a European square versus a New England town green. We program it pretty heavily. We have several annual events. We just finished up our biggest one, our Celebrate Mansfield Festival. And we're concluding this season with Winter Welcome, which is December 2nd from 4:30 to 6. I invite you all to come. So Magdalena and Kathleen, a couple of years before her, were our leads on events. And we have to be a little careful that we don't overdo it in terms of our staff capacity. So we also allow people to, quote, rent the square for a very minimal amount and do their own programming on the square. And that's something I want to continue to work on with COVID and kind of shut things down for a while, but it's really open to everybody. It's owned by the town, and we want everybody to access it.
That's great. Bob has a question here. Who did you meet with first, and how did subsequent conversations evolve? Bob, maybe if you want to take that, or I don't know if you need any more clarification.
Not really. Just I find that that first presentation, conversation is so critical. You know, who's in the room, how do you gauge their reactions, and then how did those conversations, how do those conversations evolve and expand to other groups, other audiences, and then change, evolve, you know, that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think in terms of when I started back in 2002, I met with every board member individually at either their place of business or at lunch. And then I also met with several folks I mentioned earlier that had questions and concerns about the development. And then just kind of worked through the town committee system, worked through contacts that I got, whether it was the Lions Club. I met with the Lions Club. I met with the chambers. We got them very involved. They became members. So it sort of was a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot of individual meetings that we started with. And then because of the partnership structure, we always had, with very little exception, UConn and town in the room at the same time. So there wasn't a time where UConn was off doing something or the town was off doing something. So whether it was through our board structure or we have we do, and especially that had a very strong committee structure. So everything had flowed through the committee. So planning and design, which we don't have that committee anymore, but they were the ones that really spearheaded the approval process. And that was a committee where we had a lot of people from diverse backgrounds and diverse feelings about how this should go. And they really shaped how things went. So I also have to give Leyland a huge amount of credit. They hired somebody to move to Connecticut full time to really be the project manager. And they came to a lot of those 400 meetings. They were very willing to do so. The personalities worked well with our group, especially Macon Toledano, Lou Marquette. Just easy people to talk to, and that really went far, I think, with our community members. It's a little bit of a disjointed answer, and Bob, I'd be happy to talk to you offline about specifics if you want.
Thanks. These are great questions, guys. We have time for a few more, so feel free to type in here. Next question here was a form-based code adopted for the area, or were design standards made a part of the local zoning?
So design standards were made part of the local zoning. So if you go on to the zoning regulations, there's a whole section on Storrs Center. So you can see, what, for instance, we don't allow dry cleaners, we don't allow gas stations, that type of thing. So I would highly encourage folks to go on that. And I can send Kristen, Kathleen, or I can send her the link if you want to see that. But yeah, it was a whole new set of regulations.
Yeah, perfect. I'll include that link into our webinar recap notes for sure. We don't have any more questions at the time. I did have one question that came up in your presentation about your membership portion, and that your membership elects 6 of your board members. And I'm just curious if you could just explain that a little bit more. And I know that contributes to your budget. If you could just explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So when we first started, we had a membership development committee, and their sole purpose was to try to bring members into the partnership. And largely the hook was believing in what was going to happen, because there had to be a lot of vision and a lot of, it will happen. And financially, we needed the support. So at its height, we probably had about 400 members, and we're probably down quite a bit from then. But what we've done is to try to bring in larger donations. So our membership structure right now goes from the lowest for an individual is $25. The lowest for a business is $100. So we're trying to focus a little bit more on the larger donations, but the members have the ability to be on our board, the ability to be on a committee, and vote again on our, as you mentioned, Kristen, on our 6 members on our board. And so they've been critical and critical to really selling the idea of the downtown, whether it was informally or formally. And so they've been very important to what we're doing, and we're continuing to focus on building that base back up, and again, trying to get some larger donations too.
Yeah, that's excellent. I like that model in terms of not just a potential funding source, but also kind of like an ambassador type engagement.
Absolutely.
And that you want to see them engaged and hear their feedback. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Kathleen, for putting in the chat the guidelines, and I also will include them on the webinar recaps. Any other questions that we have for Cynthia? This was really great, and I could tell by the questions it's a topic that a lot of people are thinking about, whether they're constructing completely from scratch or trying to kind of put together their a Main Street experience with buildings that they may already have, in existence. I'll just give a few more questions, a few more minutes here to see if we have any more questions come through. Will the presentation be available later? Yes, it will. Maybe in a few days, we will send the presentation and a link to the recap out to everyone.
And I'd be happy, like I said, to talk to anybody offline. It was, to say the least, very involved process and a lengthy process. So, and we have our development agreement, which is a public document. All those documents I mentioned are public in case anybody wants to use them for their discussions or as a model. Be happy to provide any of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have some just wrap up notes here. So let me share my screen again. Thank you again, Cynthia, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I am sharing my screen. That's correct, right? Okay. So we invite you to join the 80+ communities around the state committed to improving their Main Street by becoming a member of Connecticut Main Street Center. Our network includes professionally managed downtowns like Downtown Storrs, but it also includes municipal planning and economic development departments and 2 regional organizations. And as a member, you receive exclusive help and resources to help your downtown work. You can please visit our website, ctmainstreet.org, to learn more. I wanted to give a quick save the date for our next in-person summit at the Goodwin Hotel in Hartford on Main Street Blight and Vacancy. It's going to be a really great topic, an important topic. So mark your calendars, and we'll be sending out the registration information. I'm guessing in January, but mark your calendars in advance. And with that, thank you again to all of our sponsors and program partners. Reminder, when you exit this webinar, you should be prompted to complete an evaluation. Please do so. It really helps us create more great, valuable webinar content for you. And with that, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everyone.